Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. Hurricane Katrina and the catastrophic flooding of New Orleans happened more than a decade ago. And yet, so many elements of that story continue to resonate powerfully today, and not just in New Orleans, but throughout America. We'll talk about the then and the now of that terrible tragedy with Gary Rivlin, a former New York Times reporter and author of the extremely insightful book, Katrina, After the Flood. Gary, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. So let's start with how New Orleans has fared 11 years after that disaster. One civic leader said the city's recovery is one of the greatest urban revivals of our lifetime. Was he on the mark, near the mark, off the mark, what?
Well, so if you were in New Orleans in those first weeks after Katrina like I was, there was a palpable sense that this city might be doomed, that there'd be a much smaller version of New Orleans. So I know what he's saying, that the fact that New Orleans is once again a great tourist destination, the Central Business District is doing really well. Culturally, the music scene is very strong. There are more restaurants today than 11 years ago, even though there's 20% less people. So in some ways, New Orleans is doing really well. The problem is that's half the city. Right. I point out that New Orleans today has the second highest wealth gap of any city in the United States. There are vast stretches of the city that still look like the hurricane happened, the flooding happened a few years ago. I mean, you've got the lower Ninth Ward that's maybe a third back 11 years after Katrina. You have black working class neighborhoods like the 7th Ward are maybe 60% back 11 years after Katrina. Even some black middle class wards, Gentilly, maybe 75% back. So the city has a long way to go to recovery, but you had civic leaders, the mayor. The mayor had his mission accomplished moment, right before the 10th anniversary said, the flood is behind us.
This is Mayor Mitch Landrieu.
Right.
Yeah.
Mitch Landrieu in his State of the City address at the 10th anniversary declared the storm behind us. We have recovered, yet you had vast stretches of the city that were a long way from recovery.
Right. One of the points stressed in your book, and it really is a terrific book. I recommend it, Katrina, After the Flood. One of the points stressed in the book is that there were essentially two halves to New Orleans, the eastern half and the western half. I mean, one of your sources actually drew a dividing line down the middle of the map. Talk about the difference between those two halves.
So, it's interesting. I was a New York Times reporter then in Silicon Valley covering, Google going public and the firing of Carly Fiorina at Hewlett-Packard when Katrina hit. But, this was an all-hands moment. They asked if I'd go. I was with the business desk. I was writing for the business section then. So they sent me there to find a single business hit hard by the storm, just to chronicle the attempts to recover. And I found Liberty Bank, Alden McDonald, extraordinary figure, one of the 10 largest black-owned banks in the country. They were devastated by Katrina. 7 of their 8 branches in the city were flooded, looted, their headquarters. And I contact him, Alden McDonald, 11 days after the storm, and he says, yes, I'll talk to you, but I have one precondition: bring a map. Which, by the way, wasn't so easy to find after.
Absolutely.
At that moment.
I was down there, and it was the same thing. It was difficult getting a map, and also many areas didn't have street signs and that sort of thing. It was very hard getting around.
Exactly, and so he has me come in, and halfway through the interview, he says, give me the map. Takes out a marker and draws it down the middle. And he goes, the part of New Orleans you as an outsider know, Gary. The French Quarter, the Central Business District, the Garden District, that's in the western half of the city. That's the largely white half of the city. The eastern half, which is a mostly black part of the city, that's where the flooding was worst. All of the eastern half of the city, the lower lying part of the city, was flooded. Big pieces of the western half were flooded, but there were islands to build from. There were no islands to build from in the eastern, predominantly black part of the city.
I mentioned the relevance of that story to today, and New Orleans during the flood and the aftermath was a story of race, poverty, inequality, many of the issues that face the country today. If there were serious lessons to be drawn that we should be paying attention to now, especially with the accession of Donald Trump to the presidency, what are some of those lessons, do you think?
Well, one is the simplistic frame I think the media used to understand New Orleans after Katrina. There was the lower Ninth Ward, lower income blacks, and there were wealthy whites. And it's a much more complicated story than that. There's a vast middle class in New Orleans. There's professionals, teachers, working class people, and they were just left out of the story. So first off, I'd say one lesson from the Katrina days that I feel like the same mistake is being made. There are middle class folks of all races, and sometimes we lose sight of that.
Right.
Another thing that really resonates is that in the weeks and months after Katrina, there were whites who were saying it's time to go back in time for New Orleans, to make New Orleans great again.
Right.
Essentially, and there was this concerted effort, a successful effort, I'll point out, led largely by the blue bloods, the wealthy white families of New Orleans, to use Katrina as an opportunity to take a city that was a majority black, with a black mayor, black city council majority, black police chief down the line, and revert it back to a majority white city with a white power structure.
In essence, to take their city back.
To bring it back to the 60s.
Their view, right.
Until school desegregation, New Orleans was a city through like the mid-60s that was 2/3 white, 1/3 black. When there was when courts said that black and white children will go to school together, there was a massive white flight from New Orleans. 160,000 whites left New Orleans over a 2-decade period, and by the start of the 80s, it was a city that was 2/3 black and 1/3 white.
So when I was reading about it and had also covered some of this, when I see this whole idea of take back our city or make New Orleans the way it was before, now I can't help but make the connection to what's going on with a lot of Donald Trump supporters, make America great again, and people talking openly about taking back our country. How big of an issue do you think that is? I mean, I think it's huge, but it's possible that I think it's that my view of this is overblown. What's your take on it?
No, there's a huge racial element to the Trump victory. Just the sense that equality seems like oppression to those who are used to running things.
Right.
And I think you see the same thing in New Orleans after Katrina. This idea that like, wow, this is our chance. And by the way, 5 years after Katrina, white mayor, white supermajority on the city council, white police chief, whites in charge of public housing and the schools. That lasted for a few years. Now we're back to there's a white mayor, but it's a black majority in the city council,
right.
Black police chief and all. I mean,
what about the population now?
The population is, it's a majority black, but not the same. It's about 58-60% majority black. Now, what's fascinating, or what's horrific, if you ask me, there's a big effort to get rid of the public hospital that was successful, big effort to get rid of the, what we'll call then the big 4 public housing projects, the 4 biggest public housing projects. They're all knocked down.
Not all of them were in bad physical shape.
They were very sturdy 3-story, 2-story brick buildings. Some of them got flooding, some of them had no flooding, but they knocked them all down at a time that the city was desperate for affordable housing, right? I mean, 80% of the city was covered in water. They were desperate for affordable housing. And so what you saw at the 10-year mark, at the decade mark of Hurricane Katrina, there were 100,000 fewer blacks living in New Orleans at the 10-year mark when compared to the time of Katrina. This is a city of 455,000, so there's a real remaking of New Orleans after Katrina.
What was the stated reason for getting rid of all of those public housing complexes?
That we want to have mixed income. I mean, there is something, the urban experts will tell you that mixed income housing, 1/3 low income, 1/3 moderate income, 1/3 market rate housing, which is what it was replaced with, is preferable. But again, this was in the middle of emergency times, and then 3 of the 4 big 4 were actually well constructed. It actually made no sense. You had the Bush administration and HUD in Washington wanting to knock it down. You had locals in the state and city government wanting to knock it down. I mean, there was a black mayor at the time, Ray Nagin, but he representing more the middle class, not wanting,
right.
kind of the lower income people. I mean, I think sometimes we think that, it's black versus white. Well, one thing I learned during New Orleans, after New Orleans, sometimes it's black middle class versus black
It's not
lower
always
income.
so clear.
Right.
One of the big stories with national implications was the remaking of the public school system in New Orleans. And Arne Duncan, the former education secretary, former U.S. education secretary, said that Katrina was the best thing ever to happen to the school system in New Orleans. What's your take? Well, first, what did they do with the school system? And what's your take on how well it worked out?
Right, so the thing about a disaster is it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to remake systems. 80% plus of the school buildings were flooded after Katrina, and the state used that opportunity to lay off every one of the 7,000 parish, essentially county employees. And so they could remake the system, and they made it as a almost exclusively charter system. It was understood that if you want to come back as a charter school, you would have a much better chance of coming back than if just under regular school. So the system is now 90% or so charter. If you want to look at it today, it's a better system than it was before Katrina. A couple of things. One, it's still a long way from a healthy school system. I mean, you still have many schools getting failing grades. They're just directionally going in the right way. But I also think about the lost generation. So here you had this traumatic flood where 80% of the people had to leave for months, if not several years, before they could come back. And what do you want when you come back? Some sense of stability. Where's the neighborhood school? You want to go back to the school. You want to have some normalcy in your life. But people came back to a completely remade system that, this school would open, you do all your research, you'd send your child to that school, but then it would close the next year. So there's chaotic 5 or 7 years. So the tragedy is, to me, there was a lost generation of kids, the Katrina kids, who just came back to a system, that expression about building the airplane while you're flying it.
Right.
There's a lot of kids who went through a system that, was not quite ready to teach.
President George W. Bush was in the White House at the time of the Katrina disaster, and he was really pretty severely criticized for the federal government's response.
Or lack thereof.
To the tragedy. How well or poorly did he do, both in the short term and then in the longer term?
Yeah, I really do break it into two. If you want to talk about those first days after Katrina was flooded, a horrible job. You had 25,000 people stranded at the Superdome. There were 20,000 more people at the convention center. It wasn't until day 6. I mean, there's the Mississippi River there. You could send a boat up. The convention center is right next to the river. The Superdome's a mile or so from the river. There were ways to get those people out there. One of Ray Nagin's better comments, I thought, were, about a week after Katrina, he was asked, was this about race? And he said, well, all I know is I think if it was a disaster of this magnitude in Orange County, I don't think the federal government would have been so slow to help. And I think he's right. But the truth is, George Bush had an enormous political problem on his hand with Katrina. And so what you saw in the weeks and months afterwards, is you had the Bush White House fighting Republicans in Congress. You had a majority Republican in the House, majority Republican in the Senate. He was fighting his own party to get more money for New Orleans. You could cynically say that's because he had a political problem, but the fact is that city needed recovery money, and one of the big victories that Louisiana had was Road Home, a $10 billion plus housing recovery program, the largest housing recovery program in U.S. history. That was George Bush who helped make that happen. It was his administration. So I'd actually give Bush terrible grades for that first week, and pretty good grades for the recovery. Doesn't mean the recovery was healthy. I would blame more local officials for the mistakes there.
And one of the local officials, the main local official, was Ray Nagin that you mentioned, the mayor. Controversial would be an understatement if you're talking about Ray Nagin. How did he do during the crisis, and talk about what ultimately happened with Ray Nagin.
Yeah, so, you almost feel sorry for New Orleans going through a Katrina, a massive flooding. I mean, this is the worst urban disaster in modern U.S. history. You have to go back to Galveston in 1900 for maybe the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco for disaster on this order. And here you had a political neophyte. You had somebody who had never held office before. He was just a business guy who came at the right moment. There's some parallels to here that in New Orleans, they were just frustrated. Black and white were just frustrated with the corruption of government, the inefficiency of government, and maybe we need a businessman to come in and really turn things
Someone
around.
with no government experience.
And he won with 80% plus of the white vote, and not a majority of the black vote. But he came in and was very popular until Katrina. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't have allies. You need to understand, to get something done in politics, you need political allies. You can't just throw out an idea and everyone says, oh, that's a brilliant idea, it's going to happen. And so, essentially, New Orleans was stuck for 4 or 5 years during the Nagin era because he didn't have allies and he couldn't make up his mind. He was very indecisive. He'd say, we're going to rebuild here. Somebody would push back like, okay, we're not going to rebuild here. And there were the lost years. And then there's a real tragic ending. A couple of years ago, he was put on trial for crimes of office. Again, parallels to today. The main accusation against him is that he used the office of mayor to help his own business interests, his own personal interests. And he's doing 10 years hard time in prison for using the mayor's office to help his personal business. Again, I don't know if you're hearing any parallels here.
Well, we're going through this right now. I mean, at the federal level, we've never had a situation where a president-elect had the kinds of business interests that Donald Trump has.
Well, to stick with Ray Nagin, some of the things he did. So he, after Katrina, his two sons, grown-up sons, said, "Let's get into
what family business."
Yeah, right. Let's get into the kitchen repair business. This whole city needs new home, so they're going to get in the kitchen counter business, and they used their father to fund it. So the dad went into business. Ray Nagin went into business with his two sons, and he used city stationery to write to the head of Home Depot to try to get his sons, his own business. Again, he owned 40, put up the money for it. He owned 40% of it, to get them into Home Depot, and that's what he was put on trial for, and that's what he's sitting in jail for.
Wow. One of the things Donald Trump will face as president, you never wish a tragedy on anyone, but there will be some kind of domestic disaster at some point that the Trump administration will have to deal with. Again, this is a fellow who comes in without any government experience. What kind of lessons should he be paying attention to coming out of George W. Bush's Katrina experience?
Right, so Bill Clinton, in fact, George W. Bush as a candidate against Al Gore complimented Bill Clinton on the stage during one of the debates and said, I have to hand it to President Clinton. He did a really good job of professionalizing FEMA. Of course, his brother, George Bush's brother, Jeb, was the governor of Florida, a place that's had more than their share of hurricanes and floods, and because Bill Clinton professionalized FEMA. Well, George Bush came into office and he put neophytes in charge of FEMA. Michael Brown, heck of a job, Brownie. His previous job was as the general counsel for the Arabian Horse Association.
I always found that the most fascinating thing.
Bizarre. He had no experience in crisis management. He had no experience dealing with this kind of disaster. And then there's the overlay of the ideology that this government and George Bush that wanted to shrink the size of government. In New Orleans, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers said we need 25 million or so. This is a couple years before Katrina, to shore up the levee system. The Bush administration only gave them $4 million. So there's this idea that with less and less money, we can't even take care of our infrastructure. We can't even take care of what we need to take care of. So to save the $20 million, it ended up costing the U.S. government more like $130 billion because of this disaster. But so you look at ideology of the idea of let's spend less money, and then you look at the competency. Who do you put in charge, Obama, having learned a very valuable lesson from George Bush, put a professional in charge of FEMA. I'm really hoping, for the sake of whatever communities go through this, that there's a professional in charge of FEMA.
Let's talk about the lower Ninth Ward. That was the area that most Americans were paying attention to on television. Parts of the lower Ninth Ward, tremendous devastation. I remember being down there with a notebook and just looking around figuring, how am I even going to describe this? So talk about who lived in the lower Ninth Ward, what happened to it, and how has it fared subsequently?
Right, so the lower Ninth Ward is a really interesting place. It's cut off from the rest of New Orleans. In the 1920s, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built a canal right through the Ninth Ward and created a lower and upper Ninth Ward. Everyone, including Mayor Nagin, thought the lower Ninth Ward has its name because it's the lowest lying part of New Orleans. That's not true. Lakeview, white middle class community, lower lying. New Orleans East, black middle class neighborhood, lower lying. And it's a very working class place, kind of the housekeepers, the dishwashers, and the hotels and the restaurant industry, they live. They live there. High crime area, but working class place, but very community feel. It's the kind of place that people live there for generations. Devastated by Katrina, especially if you live near the levee breach. But parts of the lower Ninth Ward were above sea level, so they had 3, 4, 5 feet of water. But it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, the lower Ninth Ward, it can't come back. You had Mayor Nagin saying that. You had the HUD secretary at the time, Samuel Pierce, come down. We shouldn't rebuild the lower Ninth Ward. And that just became this refrain. In New Orleans, while it's the lowest lying area, we shouldn't rebuild the lower Ninth Ward. It was the last place to open to its own citizens. You had other flooded neighborhoods opening about a month or so after the storm. Lower Ninth Ward didn't open to its own residents until 3 months.
Wow.
I could get in as a reporter. You could get in as a reporter. A resident couldn't get in.
Yeah, it was empty. When I was there was no one around.
And so it's just all this lost time to deal with your insurance, to kind of come up with a plan. Last to get electricity, last to get running water, last to get gas, last to get FEMA trailers. There was a school there, the Martin Luther King Junior School, an elementary school. It was hit hard by the flooding, but the building was intact. Teachers, the principal, very committed, worked really hard to clean it up, used a lot of volunteer effort, and said, okay, we're ready to reopen, we're ready to teach kids. Because, I mean, how does any community come back if the school doesn't come back? The school district wouldn't listen. Oh, that's not a priority. Why would we spend any money on a school in the lower Ninth Ward? And so you look at the lower Ninth Ward today, and some of the reason it explains why it's only like 30–40% back is because of income. You didn't have much wealth there, and you needed wealth to rebuild. Homes would be priced at $60,000, $80,000. Insurance gives you $80,000, but to rebuild the home, it costs you $200,000. Right. And so there are all these reasons it didn't come back, but one of the reasons it didn't come back is because the people in charge at the local level and the federal level didn't think it should come back, and so there's this self-fulfilling prophecy, so it did not come back the way it could have.
Well, we're going to have to stop there, although I wish we could just go on. I think it's a really fascinating story, and I love the connections or the relevance to today. The book is Katrina After the Flood by Gary Rivlin. Gary, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Take care. We'll be back in a moment with a final word. Less than 2 weeks after the election of Donald Trump as president, the leading members of the so-called alt-right movement held a conference in a federal building named after Ronald Reagan, just blocks from the White House. There was a flurry of press coverage, but not enough. This is a story that should not be allowed to die. For starters, we should dispense with the term alt-right and use the terms that accurately describe who these people are: white supremacists and anti-Semites. And it should be emphasized that the meeting was a celebration of the election of Donald Trump. The main speaker at the conference was a 38-year-old organizer named Richard Spencer, and he left no doubt as to what he and his followers were about. As the New York Times reported, he railed against Jews and, with a smile, quoted Nazi propaganda in the original German. America, he said, belonged to white people, whom he called the children of the sun, a race of conquerors and creators who had been marginalized, but now, in the era of President-elect Trump, were awakening to their own identity. Spencer told his cheering audience that, quote, America was, until this last generation, a white country designed for ourselves and our posterity. It is our creation, it is our inheritance, and it belongs to us. At one point during his thunderous address, Spencer cried out, "Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!" Several members of the excited audience stood up with their arms outstretched in the Nazi salute. This hideous display was happening not far from Washington's National Holocaust Museum. And just as Trump often rails wildly against the press, Richard Spencer took the opportunity at the conference to denounce the media. "Perhaps we should refer to them in the original German," he said, "Lügenpresse." The audience responded, "Lügenpresse," which was the Nazi-era term that meant lying press. This is what Donald Trump has wrought. This is what is happening out in the open in today's America, just blocks from the White House in a federal government building named for Ronald Reagan. That's all for now. See you next time.